It changes from day to day and from season to season, but in any given place there are certain weather patterns that occur again and again over a long period of time. These long-range weather patterns make up the climate of any particular place on the Earth. The Earth has several quite different climate regions. To see why, the first thing we need to look at is latitude. We measure latitude in degrees, starting at the equator, 0 degrees latitude, and measuring northward to the North Pole, which is 90 degrees north latitude, and southward to the South Pole, which is 90 degrees south latitude. To see why latitude has an important influence on climate, we need to notice the way the sun's rays strike the Earth. The most direct rays fall on or near the equator. At noon on any day, a person standing at the equator would find that the sun is either directly overhead or very close to being directly overhead. But on the same day, in a part of the Earth well north or south of the equator, the sun's rays are more indirect. The exact angle depends on the time of year. And when the sun's rays are less direct, they give less light and heat. So, in places near the equator, in the low latitudes, the climate is usually warmer than in places farther away from the equator, in the middle and high latitudes. So, latitude is the starting point for understanding climate, but only the starting point. There are several other things that also influence climate. One of these influences is the constant motion of the blanket of air we call the atmosphere. This constant motion is caused partly by the differences in temperature between high and low latitudes, and partly by the rotation of the Earth. The result is a pattern of prevailing winds, and that helps to create various types of climate. Land and water also affect climate in several ways. To begin with, under the rays of the sun, land areas warm up more quickly than water, but warm water holds its heat longer. So, in a place like Chicago, on the shores of Lake Michigan, the land area near the lake is usually cooler in summer and warmer in winter than land areas farther away from the lake. In much the same way, winds passing over the ocean affect the climates of land areas near the seacoast. And oceans also affect the climate of these land areas in another way. There is a pattern of ocean currents, created by the prevailing winds and the rotation of the Earth. Some of the currents are cold, and others are warm. The Gulf Stream is a warm current that originates in the Gulf of Mexico. It flows northeastward and becomes the North Atlantic Current, which flows past the coast of northwestern Europe, including the British Isles, even as far north as Norway, where the same current is called the Norway Current. It produces a warming effect near the Atlantic coast. So, ocean currents are another way that water affects climate. And the climate is also affected by differences in land and landforms. One factor is altitude, the distance above sea level. Generally, the greater the distance above sea level, the cooler the temperature. Higher elevations also have a greater daily range of temperature. The land warms quickly, but it cools off just as quickly after sunset. And mountain ranges also affect climate by acting as barriers against the prevailing winds. In Central Europe, cold winds from the north are blocked by the Alps. Places south of the Alps, like the Po Valley of Italy, have a mild climate and a long growing season that makes it possible to raise rice and other crops that could not survive in the colder climate north of the mountains. So, there are several things that have an effect on climate. Altitude and mountain barriers. Differences in temperature between water and land. Ocean currents. The prevailing winds that move over land and water. And, of course, latitude. These influences combine in various ways to create several different types of climate. The coldest climates are in the high latitudes. We're flying northward over the evergreen forests of northern Canada. This is the subarctic climate region, with short summers and long, cold winters. The region is also called the taiga, a Russian word meaning forest. North of the taiga, the average temperature is too cold for trees to grow. This is another climate region, called the tundra. There's some plant life on the tundra, and that makes it possible for animals to live here during the warmer months. At the highest latitudes are the polar or ice climate regions, including most of Greenland and the Arctic Ocean surrounding the North Pole, and the continent of Antarctica surrounding the South Pole. Polar or ice climates are very dry. Only a small amount of snow falls during any one year, but almost all the snow that does fall stays frozen and builds up as a layer of ice. In parts of Antarctica and Greenland, the ice cap is as much as 2 miles or 3 kilometers thick. So the Earth's coldest climates are generally found at the high latitudes, far from the equator. And the Earth's hottest climate regions are generally found near the equator at the low latitudes. A tropical rainforest like this one is typical of the climate region often called the humid tropics. Typical products of the humid tropical region include bananas and cacao. We use cacao to make chocolate. And latex is used to make rubber. There are always some variations in climate, even in places very close to the equator. Mountain areas and high plateaus have cooler climates because of their altitude. On the borders of the humid tropics are regions with a different yearly pattern of rainfall, caused largely by the effect of the prevailing winds. This is what is often called the tropical wet and dry climate region. Parts of Southeast Asia are in the tropical wet and dry climate region. Winter here is a dry season, and summer is a season of heavy rains, the monsoon season. An important crop here is rice, which needs a large amount of water to grow well. Also found in the low latitudes are large areas called the low-latitude drylands. There is a semi-arid or fairly dry region, and then the dry climate of the desert. large parts of the Middle East are included in the desert and semi-arid climate regions of the low latitudes. In Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Middle East, large-scale irrigation projects have helped to make the land more productive. Low-latitude deserts have the world's hottest climates. All year long, the dry air and clear skies cause the desert sands to heat up very quickly during the day. But you'll find desert and semi-arid climates not only in the low latitudes, but in the middle latitudes as well. These middle latitude dry lands may have very high temperatures in summer, but winters are cooler than in the low latitude dry lands. In the middle latitudes, in places with a semi-arid climate, the most important crop is often wheat, because it can survive a period of very little rainfall. Semi-arid regions are often called steppes. That's another Russian word that refers to a large, fairly dry region in the Soviet Union. Dry climate regions, desert and semi-arid, are found in both the low and the middle latitudes. A few other climates are found only in the middle latitudes. One of them is the Mediterranean climate. As you might expect from the name, the largest area with this climate is on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, in southern Europe, parts of the Middle East, and parts of northern Africa. Summer here is long, dry, and usually hot. Most of the yearly rain comes during the mild winter months. Olive groves are a common sight in the Mediterranean region. Despite the low summer rainfall, olive trees grow well here, even without irrigation. A Mediterranean climate is also found in Southern California and in several small areas in other parts of the world. The Mediterranean climate is one of two types of subtropical climate, found in the middle latitudes. The other type is the humid subtropical, found in the southeastern United States, including the Cotton Belt, and in South America and Asia. This warm, moist climate is favorable for several types of crops, including rice, sugarcane, and citrus fruit. Humid subtropical regions have a higher annual rainfall than Mediterranean climate areas, and the rainfall is more evenly distributed throughout the year. Finally, at slightly higher latitudes, you'll find two more middle latitude climate regions. One is the marine west coast climate, found on the west coast of northern North America, parts of the west coast of South America, and in northwestern Europe. The effects of nearby ocean currents are spread by the prevailing winds blowing from the west. This creates a moderating effect on the temperature, and the moist winds from the ocean bring many foggy, rainy days to this climate region. Further inland, where the influence of the ocean is not as great, there are areas with another type of middle latitude climate. Generally speaking, the summers are hot and winters quite cold here. This humid continental climate is found in large parts of North America, Europe, and Asia. It's in regions with this humid continental climate that the effects of the changing seasons are most noticeable. So, the Earth has several different climate regions, each with its own pattern of weather conditions that occur again and again over a long period of time. In any part of the Earth, climate has an effect on the way we live and what we do. And many scientists feel that some of the things we do can have an effect on the climates of the world. The rapid growth of industry has caused a large amount of carbon dioxide and other pollutants to be released into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide absorbs heat that would otherwise escape from the atmosphere into space. This greenhouse effect may cause the climates of the world to gradually become warmer. So, understanding climate can be important to our plans for the future. No matter where we live, we'll always be affected by the climates of the world around us.